Welcome to One. We'll learn about the one body of Christ, one story at a time. Welcome to another episode of One, this podcast where we get the opportunity to learn about this one body of Christ and really the many stories that are in it. And this morning, I'm really stoked that I get to have good friend Sean Purdy join us. And Sean, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Robert. Really happy to be here and honored that you've selected me to talk about my favorite subject, myself. Just kidding.
That's exactly why I wanted you to have you here, my friend. Well, folks that know Sean know that he's just a delightful guy, and both you and your wife, Liza, have just the gift of hospitality. I mean, it's truly a gift, and you guys really have it, and have just, my wife and I enjoyed hospitality that you guys have shown to our family, and I just really want folks to, excuse me, to get a chance to know you and hear your really incredibly varied background. I think a lot of people are going to resonate with your story. So let's kind of jump on in. And Sean, maybe kind of start off with, tell us about your family right now. Like who's in your family? And we'll start there.
Okay, so my wife, Liza, of course, everybody knows Liza because you can't not know Liza. I have my oldest, James, who is 19, and my youngest, David, who's going to be turning 11 here on Saturday. Oh. And then we have our two toy poodles, Padme and Anakin.
See, that's another reason I had to have you on because, we have three dogs. And our three are also named after Star Wars. So we've got Luke that came first. Then we've got Leia. And then we just got another dog this summer. Of course, that's Rey. So you have to stick with the Star Wars theme, my friend.
Absolutely.
Well, man, that's great. And for you, Sean, you guys are newer to the area, to Santa Clarita. When did you guys move here?
We moved here, very end of the year, 2017. I think it was 2 days before 2018 rolled. So we're new to California, pretty new, and you know what? We love it. Love it.
Yes, I see Liza in your Facebook posts occasionally, and it will just be this picture of outside and a contrast between what you're getting to experience, right now in Southern California, and weather back in Pittsburgh, and just how happy you are to be here. So not throwing shade at any of your East Coast, family or friends, but you guys are eating it up.
Well, we're never going back, so if we can help it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we lived here in Southern California for, a good 9 years, about, what was it, 99 to 2007. And then we went overseas for 3 years, north of England, and then we're out on the East Coast for 4 years. And those 7 years, dude, there were times, where you wonder if the sun exists. Like, has it just gone away for good? I will never, ever take the sun for granted.
Absolutely. We get too much of it here. Well, no, man. I can't say that.
Now, so you came from Pittsburgh, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay. And how long were you guys out there?
Well, Liza and I moved to Pittsburgh when I was 10. I'm actually an immigrant. I was born in England a long time ago. My parents are English. I come from a long line of peasants and coal miners, and my parents immigrated to Alberta, Canada when I was 2. My dad got a job in a mine in Alberta, kind of mid Alberta. And then, from there, we moved to Utah, a tiny town called Sunnyside, Utah, when I was 6. My dad got another mining job in a Kaiser steel mine in Utah. And when I was 10, we moved to Pittsburgh, where my dad was able to get out of the mines, working for a mining machine company. So it was kind of like the first big city we ever moved to. And that's where I met Liza because we went to the same church growing up. It was a Episcopal church called Church of Our Savior. It was a very small church, and it had been around since the 50s. And, it was really tight church, small. There's a 7 years difference between Liza and I. But, I didn't start dating her until she was well over 20. So don't worry about it. So anyway, yeah. So I guess since I was 10 and all of Liza's life, we lived in Pittsburgh.
That is incredible. Now, for you, I'm going to fast forward because that's really fascinating when you think about your background, and particularly the mining background. Up in the north of England where we were at, mining was the industry. And then you had the whole upheaval, closing the mines, Margaret Thatcher, and just massive social, upheaval for them. But that was a way of life. It was generation to generation. It was very much like the coal mining, on the East Coast, kind of your West Virginia kind of a thing. So for your dad to leave there, come over here, that's a big up change for your family, but also for you to make that change in life and change, because when you graduated, you had a start of sort of when I think of it, a really interesting path to where you are now. And as we've talked and gotten to know you, it's this really, I think folks will really resonate with the path that you've taken and the various, education and jobs, and also in parallel, your spiritual life and your walk with Jesus. And I'd love to dig into that because I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think a lot of people will go, hey, I think that's me. I get that. So kind of walk us through that and tag along that sort of third piece. And it's definitely not third, but it's you and Liza and family along with that, right? So you're in Pittsburgh, and then you graduate, and what happens?
Well, can I just step back 1 minute to my dad?
Sure.
And I just want to point out like how God has worked with generations of our family to kind of get closer to him. My parents left England because of, I think like their relationship with their parents was not good. And, we moved to Canada, then to Utah. And one of the biggest reasons my dad moved from Utah to Pittsburgh was he didn't want my brother and I have an older brother to end up in a mine.
Really?
He wanted a better future for us. Now, he wasn't a Christian at the time, but something, was pushing him to get out of kind of this, hard work and, do something better for his family. So we moved to Pittsburgh, and my dad, when I was, I think 14 or 15, was saved. And, it was, before then he was a distant kind of father and, all that kind of stuff, but he was saved. And it was, it was not what I would call a gentle salvation. I mean, it like blew him apart. It was like, Saul.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like his life just changed.
Really,
like
Saul
in one
to Paul,
day.
just like a radical.
Exactly.
This was a earth-shattering, life-changing kind of a thing.
Absolutely. And, which was interesting. We can talk about that later. But anyway, I grew up, in the house. And when I was growing up, I was not my parents are English. My dad's a coal miner. They're relatively, basic education. I mean, my dad started in the mine when he was 15. So they didn't have like a lot of foresight to like, what's the future for our children. And, they didn't have that kind of experience. When I was growing up, in high school, I went to technical school for half the day. I wanted, very little to do with high school. I wanted just to, get out and get a job maybe someday. I was also pretty depressed, struggling with depression and anxiety, which I have my whole life, but we'll get to that. So anyway, I'm in technical school. I get out I graduate from high school. I kind of, messed around for a year, working construction and stuff. And, I was pretty depressed at the time, and I just had to get out. So I joined the Navy.
Did you realize, the struggle with depression and those things, that was something you were dealing with, or was it like, this is just I'm struggling and I just don't know why?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. Like, I just felt trapped. I just had to get out. So I ran down to the recruiter, joined the Navy, and 2 days later, basically, I was gone.
Wow.
And it was and the reason I joined the Navy is because my older brother had joined the Navy, and I had gone down to visit him. He was in Norfolk, Virginia, and I just had the greatest time, just because, like, I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of fun, and it looked like he had a community and all that stuff. So, in my time of desperation, I was like, I'm out. And I picked to be an aircraft mechanic as what, my career would be in the Navy. And essentially, it was really interesting. When I got to boot camp, most people are like, oh, this is terrible. I was like, this is awesome. I got all these people around here, like I'm not alone anymore. It's like I got some kind of purpose. It's like it was pretty cool. So I go through boot camp and I get to what's called A school, and that's where they teach you your craft. And, my craft was I was working on the airframe and mostly ejection seats, which on the aircraft and like the environmental systems and things like that, which also gives me a connection to John Buyati because we can talk about the same parts,
There you go.
His
John being an engineer in our church. And so,
exactly.
I could say you guys would connect on that.
Yeah. So, I remember just sitting one day in school and said, I'm going to make everything's going to be different from here on out. I'm going to be the best at whatever I do. I'm going to be, I'm just going to make it. I'm going to be confident. Like it was like a defining moment. Like I'm going to really study and, and be the best. And it was really fortunate because I was at the top of the class and I got to pick my orders for when I got to my squadron. So the order choices were, basically go to Miramar, California.
Okay.
Or, where else was there? Just around California, mostly fighter squadrons, but you'd have to deploy on a carrier.
Okay.
But there was one set of orders, which was P-3 Orions, and that was in the Bay Area, Moffett Field. And these planes are too big to go on a carrier. So that meant that I would never have to go on a boat, which was fine with me. So I joined the Navy. I did 4 years in the Navy, never went on a boat. But anyway, was in the Navy. I deployed to the Middle East. In fact, this was 1988 when, the Iranians were mining the Gulf of the Persian Gulf. And also that year that the Vincennes was shot down the Iranian Airbus. I was actually on the ground in Saudi Arabia during that time. So got to see all that stuff, deployed to Japan, got out of the Navy. I didn't want to stay in. I felt like there was something else. And when I was in the Navy, my brother actually led me to Christ.
Did he really? How much older is your brother?
He's 2 years older than I am.
Wow. And so he led you to Christ.
Yeah. So I was home on leave when I got back from the Persian Gulf, and he had just recently been saved. And I went home and, I was kind of seeking and searching, and, we kind of prayed, one night, and I accepted Jesus. And, that's when I basically read the Bible front to back, and like started going to church a little bit more. But I want to say it didn't really stick at that time. I know my salvation stuck, but, I kind of faded away, and but it was part of God's bigger plan for me. I got out of the Navy and I did not want to come back to Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh to me was like, just depressing. And I just had all those bad memories of depression and going nowhere and all that stuff. But I didn't have enough money, basically. And my brother was getting married. So I was going to move to Corpus Christi, Texas.
Wow.
Because I had a buddy there, and the customs flew the same kind of aircraft that we did, I worked on, but it didn't work out because God had a better plan for me, right? So I go home. It's my brother's wedding, do all that stuff, and I'm just working at Sears as an auto mechanic, changing oil and tires and stuff and brakes, and one day I'm, inspecting safe for flight, $40 million aircraft. The next day I'm changing tires at Sears, basically. So,
wow.
And during that time, I got my airframe and power plant license, FAA license to work on aircraft. But unfortunately, it was kind of in a recession. Nobody was hiring. So here I am, stuck at Sears, back in Pittsburgh, with no future, right?
And you're like 22?
Yeah, I think I'm about 22.
Okay.
Yeah. And, with this guy that was at our church, and I wasn't going back to church at this time. Jack Gabig is his name, and he was a seminary student, and he was leading the youth group. And he reached out to me and said, hey, I heard you're back in town. Would you like to help me, lead this youth group? And I was like, sure, I've got nothing else to do, So it was really an amazing experience because, I think hopefully I helped God, but during that whole thing, God helped me a lot more because, I got to hang out with like normal people, like people that were like, healthy and, balanced and, seeking Jesus and, like a real community,
Wow.
So I did that for quite some time, like 4 years. And during that time, God just kind of like tore me apart, reassembled me. When I was in high school, I took architectural drafting and design as my technical track. And, I wanted to be an architect at some point in time. I wanted to go to college at some point in time. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college, in the history of Purdy's and Thorndike's, which is my mother's maiden name. But I just couldn't connect the dots. But during this time, God really put me in touch with the right people. Because when I was working at Sears, there was a woman at our church who worked for United Cerebral Palsy.
Okay.
And she said, hey, look, I see you have a night job working at Sears, an evening job, basically. Would you be interested in driving these folks that live in this community organization to our education center at UCP, United Cerebral Palsy, in the mornings, and we'll pay you X amount an hour. And, you just got to be there at 7, drive them in, drive them back, and you'll be done by like 10. I was like, fine, that's fine. So I ended up doing that in the mornings, doing Sears in the evenings, and then, basically doing a youth group in my free time and playing guitar a little bit here and there. So, that led to other things, So eventually, the UCP, United Cerebral Palsy, asked me if I wanted to be, a kind of an independent living skills instructor for adults with cognitive disabilities. So that meant that I would have a full-time job, I'd have benefits, and that's what I did for, I can't remember, 3 or 4 years.
Did you realize? That's completely. I did not realize that. I mean, I knew the Navy, and then what comes after, but I didn't realize that for 3 or 4 years you were doing this independent living instructor with cerebral palsy patients.
Yeah, well, it was mostly adults with head injuries.
Okay,
is who I was working with. So it was an amazing experience. One that I got to work with just so many awesome people. The participants in the program and my fellow staff members. This is the first time I really worked with a lot of educated people. And, because I never really had that experience before, and they were very encouraging. I got to, get into really great conversations. I started reading a ton, like all the classics, all the, just reading. And, it was like at some point, I was like, I'm going to start going to college, So I started at a community college, and I was terrified, because of my I failed algebra in high school or got a D or something, and I hated writing papers. And I go to college, and it's like, I love this. This is like
the flip had been switched for you, because up until that point, there was no desire, there wasn't interest in it.
Nothing.
It was like, this doesn't, right? And it took that time for you to go, no, I want this, right?
Well, there was a desire I knew I wanted to go to college, even in high school, but I just could not see how to get there, right? Yeah. So I'm going to community college, and I had a roommate. My roommate actually grew up in the church with me at the same church, and his parents lived right down the street from our parents. And, and he's still a dear friend. Him and his brother are still a very dear friend to me to this day. And he was very encouraging. He had just graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, and he was going to go to be an industrial designer. So like hanging out with him, and just kind of like, we worship together, we live together, we, like that community kind of sense, which I really enjoyed in the Navy, and then with the youth group and the church and all that stuff. It was really encouraging. And then, I said, all right, I'm going to go to school. And I basically sold everything I had, and I studied chemistry at University of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
I went in the full college experience. I quit my job. Fortunately, I had the GI Bill, which I signed up for, which was the best investment I ever made in my life. I picked to study chemistry, even though I never took a chemistry class in my life.
Really?
I just felt like, here's God's hand again. I'm like, okay, what do I like to do? I like to work with my hands. Well, I also like to think a lot, and at least I thought I was liking to think a lot. And I looked at the Occupational Outlook handbook, and there's jobs, and that was it. Like, I'm going to do this. So I ended up studying chemistry, kind of basically sold everything I had, got out of the apartment, moved into the dorm, the whole deal. I was an RA and then an RD, and then during that whole time I met Liza. So, God or Liza, we didn't meet Liza. I mean, we started dating when she was about ready to graduate, and I was halfway through my college. And, God really had led me to that point. So I got my degree in chemistry.
No, before you keep going there,
sure, go ahead.
One that really strikes me in that is you're being a part of that youth group, and how this youth pastor comes to you and says, "Hey, Sean, why don't you come in and help?" And so many things I've heard you talk about up to this point are related to that community, right? To that group of Christians. I mean, you talked about, seeing modeled there a healthiness, like there's life and vitality and friendships and family, and you're seeing things that are good and enriching. And then also just how God is using this group in this time, growing you in your faith, right? And then you got the lady there who's like, oh, hey, here's this job over, right, working with head injury patients.
Yeah.
And it's just all kind of interconnected in ways that you never could have seen.
Oh, no.
Right? But coming out of. And I want you to continue, but just drawing these threads together is fascinating to me, because I think about your dad.
Yeah.
And how he is really responsible, even at this point in your life, right, connected to it because of his faith and transformation. And I imagine that had a big impact on your brother.
Yes.
Right? And then your brother leading you to Christ. Right? And then you got the youth pastor, right?
Yeah.
And so even just at one point, you just think about, in our own lives, the people who have impacted us, but then also the opportunity that we have to have that kind of role in people's lives, that your dad, your brother, this lady did, the youth pastor did, or all these pieces, right, of people who have come to faith in Christ and have had a formative impact on you. Because here you are now, graduating, right, with a degree in chemistry from the University of Pittsburgh, right? You're dating Liza, and now what? What happens next?
So, I was able to get a job at the company I work for now, which is a big paint company, early in my senior year. So it was awesome. I was, I got a position. I just had to finish my year up, and I actually, the company I work with is right in Pittsburgh. The research center I worked at was 2 miles from the house I grew up in, and it was like, so. Wow. At one point, I didn't want anything to do with Pittsburgh. But now, my whole life is there. My wife is, my future wife is there. My career is there, like all this stuff, like, God changed me so much he gave me like a lot of awesome things, just like, just to heal that time of like, just despair and depression. So
and just do that, Sean, because I think that's a really powerful thing, because there's so many people, struggle with depression, anxiety, and this is sort of part of their makeup. Maybe it's part of their family history. Maybe it's a predisposition to it. I think just at this one point is sort of tying two things together that's, I think, maybe important for folks to hear, is recognizing that was part of your history. Yeah. And it's still part of your present. I mean, it's not like this has completely gone away, right? This is still an aspect of who you are and dealing with that. And yet in the midst of that, you're going through some really substantive transformations as you come to faith in Jesus, walk with him in a community of people, right, that you've seen light in the midst of that darkness. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is. But, back then, I didn't really pull this all together. It's not until you like walk 20 paces past it that you look back and say, wow, God did that. Like he changed me like that, and he did all this for me, because the story doesn't stop there. Even when I'm in college, how I got the job at the company I work for now is the guy at our church was the chair of the chemistry department for the University of Pittsburgh. Okay. And he said, hey, why don't you do an internship this summer? You can come and work in my department. I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. So and this is the year I asked Liza to marry me. Coming up to the following year. So I'm like, this is great. I need to start saving money for a ring. Fortunately, 2 months salary is not a lot for me right now. So it'll help me get off the hook easily. But I was doing this internship in that lab, and we're doing some research on some anti-cancer medicines. And the guy I was working with was a PhD student who had been working at the company I work for now, was getting his PhD. The company was covering it, and he said, hey, next summer you should intern, at this paint company. I'm like, okay. So the next summer I was an intern, and that's how the whole thing led to getting into that company. Right. Wow. So just another thing connected to the church and to God and his community, and, just how he uses everybody and everything to take care of his people. And, so I get engaged to Liza, and we, basically I finish school, I start my job, we get married, and we're living in Pittsburgh for a while. And, basically I'm working as a research chemist, and about 5 or 6 years into that, I start working on this color shifting technology, a paint that changes color. And this is where you and NorthPark come into my life early, right? Because, we've talked about this a lot. When I was in my company, and I was trying to get out of the lab. I wanted to get into the business side of thing. But when you're a research chemist, it's practically impossible. So I developed this technology that shifts color, and it may have some, possibility to use in anti-counterfeiting applications. Think of a hologram or something like that. But I needed a business unit to pick it up and pick me up, so that I could get out of R&D. Well, I finally get some funding from the corporation to move this technology forward.
Funding from the company that you're working at.
Yes.
Okay.
And I end up, Liza and I end up moving to Cincinnati because the packaging coatings division of the company wanted to take this forth. But I got this money from the corporation, kind of like a venture capital, internal venture capital fund. And, I'm starting to put together business plans. I'm traveling around the world trying to sell this stuff. Wow. And it turns out that, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years before this happens, a guy named Robert Cavan met with the senior leadership of my company and proposed an internal venture capital fund for ideas that were kind of out there and people didn't want to invest in because it's risky. And the company took that guy's advice and basically put this fund in place, which I was able to get funding off, from, and which basically got me into the business side of the corporation, which eventually led me to right here in Valencia and NorthPark Church. So it's like,
it is a crazy story. And I'll add to that, because what was just unbelievable was here a couple years ago, had a men's breakfast. And there's probably 20 guys there, big long table, and show up 7:30 in the morning. And here's this guy, Sean, who's sitting across from me. And you guys had been coming to NorthPark for, a month or two, maybe.
Yeah.
And hadn't got a chance to get to know you. So we start talking. And you go, hey, I'm from Pittsburgh. I was like, oh, really? Pittsburgh? Oh, I, in former life, worked for a consulting firm and had a project with this company in Pittsburgh, and I mentioned the name. And you go, I'm working for that company right now. And I'm like, that's crazy. No way. I'm like, yeah. And you were like, what'd you do? And I was like, this project that I was on for a few months, and I was doing this research for this idea for an internal venture capital fund, and I presented it to the senior executive vice president at the firm, and I mentioned his name, and you go, I know that guy. I'm like, really? And then... And you had this look on your face that was like you'd seen a ghost. I mean, your jaw was on the floor, and you're like, I need to tell you a story. I'm like, what do you mean? And then you told me the story. You're like, I was trying to get out of the chemistry side to get into the business side. Yeah. And it was this money from this internal venture capital fund that got me to do that. Yeah. And you're still, so that company that you got the funding with is the one that you went to Cincinnati, which is the company then that got you here to Santa Clarita. Yeah. And the connection all the way back in Pittsburgh, right, to there and to here and to me is just mind-numbing. It just blows me away, because that for me was back in, probably like 2000. And it was a strategy consulting firm. And so we're living in San Diego, and the project comes up, and there was already one going on. Well, I'd worked with the senior associate partner before on a previous project, and he goes, there's this thing that we want somebody to look at. Would you come out and do the project and everything and present it? So I was flying every Monday morning, like the 6 a.m. flight. It was a direct flight from San Diego to Pittsburgh. And so I wouldn't land in Pittsburgh till 2 in the afternoon, then drive over, get to their offices like 3:30 on a Monday, and then just they say consulting's blood money, just work. God, it was horrible. And then fly out Friday night. Well, the project was in the winter. It was like December, January, February. It was just horrible weather and gray. Yeah. But that whole project was the concept of internal venture capital funds. Yeah. And doing all the research on it, and then how to structure it, what it would look like, and presented it to the executive. I never heard what came of that. Yeah. So my suggestion was move forward. Here's why. Here's how to structure it. Here's all the things to it. But never heard anything. And then left that consulting firm really a year later, and then Lord led me through that back to ministry. So I had never heard. So that this is almost 20 years ago. No idea that they'd funded it, and then to be sitting at a men's breakfast and you be like,
mind blowing.
Yeah, they created this thing, and those funds then the Lord used. Yeah. So and the reason I share that, I'm glad you share that, because it's just to me what struck me on that was it's just an example of so many times where God is going to be at work in ways you have no idea. No idea. And I think this is one of those rare times where God's like, I'm going to just let you peek behind the curtain. And just to remind you, I'm connecting dots in ways that you have no clue.
Exactly.
Just be faithful.
Yep.
Right? Just be faithful in what God's called you to. And I'm going to use it in ways that you can't even imagine. So when you shared that, my jaw was on the floor too. I come home, I'm like, Rory, you will not believe this. I got to tell you this story.
Well, another thing too is around that time before we moved to Cincinnati, and I was always struggling with depression and anxiety. And I'd gotten to a point where I was like, when you deal with depression and anxiety, and especially anxiety, half or 3/4 of your mind is occupied like worrying, and you can't focus. But around that time as well, I started going on antidepressants, first time in my life, and it changed everything. I didn't have to worry about things as much anymore. In my mind, I just got, the brain chemistry got sorted out, and I was free. I was always worried about taking medicine because I thought, I don't want to lose who I am,
right?
Because, what if I'm all, just drooling or whatever, I don't know. But I'm afraid that I'll lose me.
Yeah.
But I think, and I still take it today, and I probably will never go off because it helped me find who I really, the real me. Because
it freed you.
It freed all that worry and anxiety. And, I still worry, and I still, it's not like I'm, a robot or anything. But, I always if you're struggling with anything like that, my experience has been just, there's solutions out there. There's medical solutions out there that really, can help. My career exploded at that point. When I got that stuff under control, and my relationship with Liza, she commented, you could ask her. She said, I knew things were different. He came home, he was whistling. Everything was put into more of a perspective, So, and my whole family has struggled with this, and I'm pretty sure it's a brain chemistry thing.
Some genetic component to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look even back to my grandparents and the struggles they've had and things like that. It just my whole family. God has really worked generation upon generation, building and building and building. And, it's my responsibility to make sure that my boys, continue on, what's important here is they know Jesus and they trust Jesus and they keep going that way. And, God has taken the Purdys from eons ago and, basically put us on a different path. And,
that
I
path
think it's amazing.
is so powerful, Sean. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think about how you're being used at NorthPark right now. You and Liza leading a small group, and I see what's really, again, I love doing these conversations because just seeing how God used community. Yeah. In the right there from the youth group, and then as for you and Liza, as newly marrieds and that community in the church, and just the formative ways of God using that community to develop you, grow you, help you through things, use you in others' lives. And now here you are across the country, and in the same way that people poured into you, and I see you and Liza pouring into people in this body. And, I see some, I think a particular young couple that, are a part of your guys' small group, and they've gone through a challenging time of, an accident and getting hurt and, and just the way I've watched you guys love on them And one, you welcomed into church, welcome to your small group, and they found community. Being at your house, having a meal, just hanging out, doing life together. Just loving on them, laughing. Yeah. And then they go through this really, really, physically painful from the accident, but then also emotionally challenging, financially challenging. And you guys are right there with them, just walking step by step, and the others in small group. And I think it's just a beautiful thing, man, because what you guys have experienced, you're continuing to experience and doing it now, really as leading out in it. And I'm grateful for that and the way I see God at work in you and Liza in here in this church and in Santa Clarita, man.
Well, thank you. And that's one of the things, like, I'm pretty hard on churches. We've been Episcopalians, we've been Lutherans, we've been Methodists, we've been Presbyterians.
Covered your bases, brother.
Well, yeah. No, we're always trying to find a church, right? So, when we came to California, like as soon as we got the word that we'd probably be moving here, Liza's like researching churches online and all this stuff. And, because it's important, like we got to find a really good church, and I never, outside of my original church, felt real community in any church until we got to NorthPark. Wow. And, it's there. Like the people were very welcoming. The worship was very meaningful. The sermons were just amazing, just the whole thing. Like, this is a community. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is it. And then when the whole thing and you and, the whole consulting thing, and I was like, that solidifies it. But, one of my concerns for our church, and I know you've been doing a really good job and we've been trying to do a good job, is this whole COVID impact. And I just hope that we can weather this storm because, people have different opinions and, it's we're not together face to face talking and working things out and being present to love on each other and all that kind of good stuff. I hope we don't lose that because, man, it's just so rare that you find that. And for me, it's, we've got that and we got to keep it.
Well, and I think a key to that is exactly your passion there. And we'll kind of end with this, Sean, is the passion that you and Liza have for that community, because it's something you got to want, right? It's something you got to work for. Yeah. It's similar to the analogy I would use would be for our own families. We can just kind of let things drift and go and not, invest in, our family and sort of community within our own family, and things kind of scatter. Or do we put in the blood, sweat, and tears, like we're just, like we're all in. And, we're going to be together. We're going to, eat together. We're going to take a vacation together. Those type of things, right? Yeah. And I think it's the same way with the church, right? You got to want that community, and you got to make time for it. You got to go, this is priority. There are a lot of good things we can do, but is it the best thing? And a lot of times it means good things have to be set aside or have to, can't do as much of. Maybe there's a little less of, this recreation or, I got to prioritize this thing to create space intentionally to be with other believers and create that community. And if you prioritize it and you invest in it, man, I think people experience what you have throughout life, that it's rich, it's life-changing. Right? It's a source, and it's all because that's God's design, right? Absolutely. That's the way that He created us, and that's how He wants us to function as a body. So, man, I'm just stoked how you guys have experienced that and are helping others experience it, because it's a key element in us growing and becoming more and more like Jesus' disciples. Yeah,
we just got to keep, welcoming people, doing kind things, loving on them, doing what Jesus wants us to do, and, sometimes I think we get, caught up on, hey, this philosophy or that philosophy or this, but I think at the end of it, and just going through this whole N.T. Wright series is like, we're here to work on the kingdom of God, and we are here to, bring people there. And our focus should be on serving people, loving people, welcoming people, bringing them in, you know, and it's, you know, and I believe we can do it. We have been doing it, and I believe we should absolutely continue doing that.
I agree, my friend. Boy, that's true. What my mentor, Dennis Keating, you know, we'd always talk about the inner eyeball disease, right? And it's our human nature that, you know, our eyeballs flip around, you know, and look inside, and we're consumed about me, and we all suffer that, right? And it's on, but you know, it's through the gospel that then God takes our eyes and flips them where they're looking out, and we're most concerned about those outside, and that's our first filter. Right, is when I look up, Lord, what do you want? And then look out, and how do we love those around us? And it's so amazing how that cures so many problems when we don't make it about ourselves.
Absolutely.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely.
Well, Sean, man, it has just been fantastic to get to hear your story, buddy. And I'm just so thankful that, you know, the Lord brought you and Liza and your lovely family here, and that we get to do life together with you guys. So, Sean, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think in so many different ways, folks are going to identify with it and just see, you know, just the various ways that God has used you and taken you on this incredible journey, not only occupationally, but, you know, just through depression, anxiety, and, you know, and how God is at work in your life in ways you never could have imagined to bring you here, to be using you guys all the way on the other side of the country. It's pretty cool, man.
It's awesome. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's fantastic. Well, folks, hey, it's good to have you again for another episode of One, where we get the opportunity to learn these many stories in this one body of Christ. So again, it's great to have you, and look forward to having you next time. Until then, Lord bless you.